Welcome to another Ozarks Voices Oral History Interview, a project of Missouri State University Libraries and its Ozark Studies Institute initiative. I'm Craig Amason with the University Libraries, and today's date is Wednesday, February 26th, 2020. Our special guest is Mr. William Hosman, and we are at his home in Ash Grove, Missouri. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here and to conduct this interview. Just for the record, can you start off by telling us when and where you were born?
I was born in Burge Hospital, North Cox, in 1950 in Springfield, Missouri. And I've resided in Ash Grove, Missouri all my life.
All your life. I understand that you are a descendant of Daniel Boone. That's correct?
Yes.
You are, he was your great-great-great-great-grandfather, I believe. Is that?
Something like
that. Is that pretty close?
Nathan was my great-great, so.
Yeah, right, okay. And is the cabin of Nathan, and Nathan was the son
of Daniel.
Of Daniel Boone, correct?
Yes.
Is the cabin of Nathan and Olive Boone, his wife, at the State Historic Site near here at the same location it was when they moved into it in 1837?
Yes.
Okay. And your farm is part of the original holdings, is that correct?
Yes. He acquired 1,200 acres when he came here. It stretched all the way to the highway, 160 down here, and this is the only 80 acres that is still in the original family because my great-grandmother inherited, or they bought it actually. I have the thing where they bought it on the wall up there, and they bought it, and they lived in a cabin back in the backside, and so she married my great-great-grandpa.
Okay. What can you tell us?
Great-grandpa, I'm sorry.
That's okay. What can you tell us about their migration into this area, descending from Daniel Boone? What do you know about family history?
Well, Daniel went a lot of places. You know, he settled in Kentucky and different places, and then Nathan started exploring, and I think Nathan was the first one that took a lady into Kentucky, but Nathan did a lot of, work for the surveying and was a soldier and things, and he said he liked this area when he come through in the Greene County area. So when in 1837, like you said, he come and settled here and acquired 1,200 acres here. So that's how they got started. So, and on my grandmother's side, she just lived right across the pasture over there, and the house over here. Of course, I know you can't see with the camera.
No, that's all right. That's
but
okay.
My grandpa stayed and took care of Mary till he was 53 years old, and then he walked across the pasture and married my grandma. So then they come and built. They lived in the back. There's a hand-dug well back there, and they lived off this 80 acres. And in 1927, they built this house here. So this farm been around a while.
So subsistence farmers, they were homestead farmers.
Yes, my grandpa, like I said, they lived off the farm. It used to be timber. There was a tornado come through before 1927, and it blew trees down, and so they put wood in the barn. And so my grandpa and people around built this house. I mean, most of the wood in this house is off the land itself.
So the house we were in was built around 1927 from timber that was felled from a tornado.
No, I'm not saying 100% stuff, but I don't know whether you're interested in this or not.
Yeah, I am.
But yes, the way they did it, I mean, like he had there's an old orchard house used to be back there, and it's fallen down, and then there's, like I said, the log cabin's gone back there now, but they lived back in the back. When they built this house, there was no electricity on this highway, just becoming in existence in 1927. Right. So they wired this house without any power being in the house. And so one day, wife and I was putting a cement sealer on the thing, and all of a sudden we fell to the shop, but there's two wires just sticking out of the side of the house. But it's got this old. So
they wired the house not knowing that when electricity was going to come.
Right.
But obviously they anticipated electricity.
Right, and the road, because it was pretty primitive back then and stuff. So, but they used to have mules, and my grandpa's day. Of course, I wasn't around when my great grandpa was here, but like I said, my grandpa got married at 50, So I was just a young person when he died, but my dad told stories. They used to have they used to farm mules, and we used to have two mules called one Dan and one Doc, and Dan was lazy and let the other mule do the work, and of course they'd come. Of course, when I got married here, where there's horse-drawn machinery all over, sitting everywhere, a little horse-drawn mower and just a binding machine and stuff. And how much of this do you want me
all
to
of it,
say?
yeah,
Okay,
sure.
So used to. There's no tractors. I mean, there's just horse, and Dad remembered having, I don't know whether it's Model T or Model A, but he, that's the only vehicle they had, and so they didn't get off the farm too much. And right down the road here, there's a place called Kelly Church now, but I think it's a Kelly School, because back the old people, you said they walked uphill in the snow going to school and walked uphill when they left school, but I don't know how much all that's true, but I mean, most people did go to one-room schools and things, so.
Sure.
So the barn out here, where they used to put hay up, they used to have a bull rake, and I don't know whether you know what a bull rake looks like, but it's just a rake that's got the big old wheels on the side, and then it's got a kind of a hook, and they pull all this hay up in a row, and then they pitchfork it onto a wagon. Of course they used to have a horse-drawn mower, and of course the sickle bar is like 4.5 feet or something like that, but then they lower on a wagon. And then if you go to these old barns, you'll see they have if you look, well, this barn you can't see, but there's a track that goes all the way back to the back of the barn, and then there's a trolley thing, and it's got forks. I don't know whether you can see what I'm doing, but it's got just kind of forks, and they have a horse, and they let it pull this rope, and this fork can come down, and then they get under this hay on the wagon, and then lift it up, and then the track go back to the back of the barn and dump the loose hay in there and stuff. And that's how they got loose, before they had square bathers or anything like that. So
So the loft would be out extended over the.
Well, the track would.
The track, right.
And then it had big old doors. If you look at the barn right now, there's great big doors at the top. And you see most of these older barns, that's why they're there, so they can get that track and loose hay up in there.
Right, so not bales, but just loose hay.
Loose hay, right. And so I don't know how they thrashed the grain back in those days, because in later days they used to have a thrashing machine that would thrash the grain. You used to have a binder. Do you know what a binder is?
Tell us.
Well, the binder it's a cutting machine. It's got a platform on it, and you turn it sideways, and somebody rides on the binder, and it cuts this grain, and it falls on this table, and then it's got a belt that, it's a canvas that draws it up, and then it falls in this little tray, and it gets so much in there, and then somebody sits on the seat that's riding on it, pulls a lever, and it puts a string around the shock. And I think there were 6 or 7 shocks to or a bundle, I'll say bundle, shocks to a shock. And my grandpa used to shock stuff, and there's an art to shocking, because you go around and pick what the binder just drops these, the binder drops these bundles on the ground, and then you go back with a pitchfork. The person has to go in the field and take a pitchfork and what you do, you stand these shocks up on end, and then the art to it is putting that other shock, or bundle, on top of the shock, so it don't shed water till they get ready to harvest it. Because if you don't seal it right, then the water gets on this. Because you got to let the grain, once you cut it, you just got to kind of, because if you cut it when it's mature, it would shatter. So they cut it just before it, kind of like people do now, they're windrowing fescue seed before they harvest it, but it's got to be a little bit green. And so, used to, I don't know whether you ever hear about a straw pile in the fields and stuff, but used to they had a thrashing machine come. And of course, you always heard about people going to other farms and helped each other thrash when thrashing season was. Well, thrashing machine was a machine that, like a combine, but it's just a stationary thrashing machine on wheels, and the person that owned one would drag it to the farm, and it didn't have a motor or anything on it. So I don't know how they did this before they had mechanical tractors, but if you look at these older tractors on the I don't know whether it's the left or right hand side, but there's a big old pulley about so big around, it's about 6 or 8 inches wide. And they have a big old wide belt, and the thrashing machine got this belt, so they'll back off about 10 feet with this tractor and line this belt up. They put a little twist in it so it don't come off the rope, but hooks the thrashing machine, and this tractor runs this thrashing machine. Well, then the people that come help thrash, they come and they bring wagons and stuff, and the neighbors come because everybody's doing it, and so they come and they take a pitchfork and go to these shocks where all these bundles have been put in, and they'll throw them on the wagon, and they got a end gate on the wagon so they can stack them up, and then they'll go to the thrashing machine and they'll throw them on the table of the thrashing machine. Somebody's throwing them into the thrashing machine, and then somebody's sitting there holding a sack and sacking up whatever grain you have. And my dad, my other grandpa, Dad poked him in the tail end with a pitchfork one time. He got mad at him for it.
I can imagine.
Well, he didn't do it on purpose, but I mean,
Still didn't feel good.
My grandpa was very precise, and my other grandpa from my mom's side. But even they say back in the old days when they trashing things, of course, everybody, the woman was always at home, and they had big dinner and stuff. So when they'd go eat, sometimes it'd be dry, and the grasshoppers, they had to put their pitchforks in a bale of hay, so the grasshoppers wouldn't chew on the pitchfork handle and get them rough, because I guess their hands and the sweat and stuff and the moisture, I don't know what it is, but they said the grasshoppers, if you left the pitchforks out in a particular situation, would chew on it. And of course, you're handling a pitchfork, you don't want a pitchfork to be smooth and stuff,
sure.
Things. So, but that's how they used to do grain. And like I said, Mom, of course, we're talking about a different farm, but she talked about riding on the back of a drag, with horse pulling a drag, you get dirty as you could, with just riding on a drag. And of course, my dad milked a while, and then my grandpa milked here a while, but I mean, nobody had a lot of cows. I mean, but you could make a living on a farm because you had chickens, and if you look out, that was nice chicken houses out there, and they used to have chickens, and they had cows, they had hogs, and
did they have sheep?
Yeah, we used to be people who go shear sheep. My grandpa sheared sheep.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to say.
Shear sheep, and there used to be a person that would go and around shearing sheep, because you had a thing, and you had a person that pedaled the crank to make the shears work and stuff. And of course, I don't know whether it's true or not. Used to be a guy, I probably shouldn't mention names, he's dead now, but there used to be a guy go around, and they called him Stinky Baker, but I don't know whether they called him Stinky because he sheared the sheep or not. But I mean, he looks kind of like I do sometimes when I go around, old gross hat and stuff on, But I think he had a shearing machine. Well, it went, and of course, all the towns used to flourish. I mean, it used to be, we still have an exchange, MFA exchange at Ashgrove, but on Saturday nights, everybody took their eggs and things and bought their staples for the week, and then also the exchange bought, your grain and different things, and you bought feed. And stepping up the calendar just a little bit, when Dad was here, we had a combine, instead of a thrashing machine.
Right.
And of course, it used to be an Alice Chalmer 5-foot cut combine, and had a motor on it, and you wouldn't combine a whole lot, but if you had wheat or anything, you take it down to the exchange, and they used to have an elevator down here. If I get talking too much, just tell me to. But the exchange used to do, farmers did everything through the exchange, because they couldn't go to Springfield and stuff too much. And of course, everybody had pickups. There wasn't no such thing as a 4-wheel drive truck at the time, and so they had a thing they had a hole in the floor with bars across it, and you had your back of your truck full of grain, and then they'd have a thing where you drive your front wheels on, and had like 2 bars, and your front wheels go in between these bars, and then it had a cable thing, and it'd lift the front of your truck up so the grains would flow out and drain on the floor, and that's how, but that's how it used to be.
That's how you dump the grain, yeah.
And it used to be, they tore it down because they afraid it got too dangerous. But you know, those grain elevators used to be way up high in the, you know, where they could.
Now, how would they determine how much grain? Did they weigh it, or how did they do it?
They had a scale.
They had a
They
scale.
weighed your grain, and then they weigh your truck.
Truck, sure.
I mean, as you drive in, they weigh it, and then when you empty it out, because
And so you were paid by the.
But yeah, of course,
weight
a
of grain.
bushel of wheat weighs so much, and
Right.
a bushel of corn, and I can't really. I don't know what it is. I'm
Right,
supposed
yeah.
to know, but and of course, you know, people used to pick corn. There's still some corn cobs in the corn crib out here in the barn. They're just on the bottom, but
Yeah. You said there was an orchard house. What kind of fruit was?
oh, I think they just did apples
Apples.
and things mostly and stuff, but it's gone also too. But there's a hand dug well still is back there, and it's rock lined. And Dad told one time the dog fell in it, so they had to quit drinking out of it for a while. So,
Yeah.
but it's always had water in it. I never had really. If I pumped water out of it, I probably wouldn't pump it dry because
Did they use a windmill to pump it initially?
they just had dropped a bucket.
Okay, all right.
Thing.
Just manually,
No, yeah. Well, there's a windmill just down the road here on actually my grandma's place across the road. There's still a windmill standing as you go home and go on. There's still a windmill. But there used to be windmills for a pump type well, not
Right.
a hand dug well. But
Right.
back in the old days, they just mostly just dug by hand, and they just
use bucket.
buckets and things. So.
What can you tell us about your formative years? You know, growing up on the farm, with the family, school, the community. What memories do you have?
Well, the thing about it's what's hurting the small communities now is because the heritage of the people that work there are gone. Used to, everybody knew everybody. Used to, if I got in trouble, people knew how to. I mean, there's too many. I had all the people as my parents, you might say,
Right,
because
right,
you
right.
couldn't do anything without somebody else knowing.
Yeah,
it,
sure,
you know?
sure.
I mean, you knew the banker. I mean, Ash Grove we used to have 2 doctors, 2 drugstores, 2 clothing stores. We had a shoe store, had a dry cleaners, had a implement store, Lucille Roselle, and then Stanley Davis put in he had a farm out south of town, and he was an entrepreneuring farmer. I mean, part of being farmer is, which I'm not blessed with it, but a lot of farming is being able to do hard work and be smart about it, you know. You can do hard work and it doesn't get you anywhere, but if you do hard work and smart about it and kind of, you know, you can entrepreneur and probably do okay.
Right.
But he set up a locker plant, and his first locker plant in Ash Grove, and then he set up a Dairy Queen, and his wife had milked out south of town. And
Tell us about the locker plant.
well, he bought a store, and they bought the equipment to put the lockers in, but see, nobody had deep freezers back in those days. So when you butchered a beef, since you put the locker plants, you could rent a locker and take your meat and stuff down there. I remember Mom going down there, and he had got some strawberries in one time. They was in a 2.5 gallon kind of little brass looking cans, and we opened them up, and I brought them home one time, and they just frozen the strawberries. It's the most wonderful thing in the world, you know. But he was the first locker plant. Now, see, my wife's folks, we used to butcher a hog when the son-in-law got involved every New Year's Day. My father-in-law would butcher a hog, and what he did, we had to scald it and scrape the hair off of it and stuff, and then you'd butcher it, and he salt cured it, you know, and kept it in a smokehouse. And of course, my mother-in-law, she'd can tenderloin and stuff. But if you want to eat something really good, it's the day you butcher it. Go eat tenderloin and hog liver. And I mean, you walk in and it's fresh, and it's you can't beat it, you know. So, but
that would only happen once a year.
Well, he did. A lot of people. That's what he did, but typically, because he had hogs, he milked, he worked out and stuff, and had a garden and stuff. And where to get back to the old days in Ash Grove, people lived, you know, they lived off the farm. The exchange used to have workers, and people could make a living. We had 3 grocery stores, and people could make a living working on the dock. Of course, people didn't take a lot of money to exist back then and
Right.
stuff. And if you want to get in my high school days, I used to go to an old 2-story grade school, and it was the cafeteria was in the basement, music department's the basement, and then the first, second, third, and fourth on the first floor, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the second floor. And it was just I hate that it's gone, but it was I don't know, it's just a neat old true brick, it's a 2-story brick building. And I used to play tag with the janitor. He used to be a coal furnace and stuff, you know, and he used to go to our church, and he'd see me. Of course, we didn't run after each other, but I'd be standing in line at lunch down the basement. He'd tag me as it, and then sometimes I'd find him, sneak up on him, and tag he was it, you know. But that kind of went on all through the grade school and stuff. But it was a pretty neat place. And then we went to high school. The high school campus was probably a quarter mile where it's at right now.
Mm-hmm.
But back in high school, we used to, in lunchtime, we didn't have a cafeteria in high school. So we would, at noontime, we would go and walk, drive. Of course, kids were starting to drive then. We'd drive back to the grade school. Well, my brother had my dad's pickup, and there's a parking lot right outside there, and his ice was on one time. Everybody piles in the back of the truck because they didn't want to walk, and they slid into a tree. So superintendent wouldn't let anybody pile in the back anymore. But you was free to go. There used to be two cafes down in Ash Grove. You could eat in town. You could go to town and eat and get back to school in time, and things and stuff. But things were pretty simple. Like I said, everybody knew you, and you better behave and things.
Well, before we leave family, I want to pan over to this photograph, and you tell me what we're looking at here, since it's on your wall.
Well, that is Mary Boone. That's Nathan Boone's youngest daughter, and she married my great-grandpa. My great-grandpa, and they lived on the back of this farm, and I always thought they inherited, but I think somehow I was looking, and they bought that in 1830. See, Nathan died in 58. I think they bought it before he died somehow. See, back they had the war, and everybody left, and there's not too many brothers and things to come back, so that's why she was about the only one that ended up in any lands, but I'll show you the deed where they bought that land. It's hanging on the wall in there. But anyway, like I said, my grandpa stayed and took care of her till she passed away in the house, and then he married my grandmother. And I guess, I don't know what year she died, but they lived back there, and then they come up here and built this house. And this house, like I said, it's got a basement in it. And they used to have horses and stuff, but they didn't dig the bait. They didn't have backhoes back in those days. They did it with a slip. You know what a slip is?
No, tell us what a slip is.
Well, a slip is a scoop. It's got 2 handles on it. It's just kind of a scoop like this, and somebody holds it, and you hook horses to it, and you just pull it along. It gathers. You get full of dirt, and then you drag it somewhere, and then you kind of lift it up and dump it, and you go again. Now, how they dug this basement, I don't know, because it is rocky here.
Yeah, I would think that was a lot of rock here. Yeah.
So I don't know how they did it, but I mean, it's just amazing what they did.
That'd have been a lot of pickaxe work.
But people had a lot of skills back then.
Sure.
I mean, I know my grandpa was a carpenter. Of course, my grandpa, he milked, and he did baling and stuff. He used to have a stationary baler. Have you ever heard of a stationary baler? And stationary balers where the baler didn't follow the windrow around the field like they do now. Stationary balers, they had to bring the hay to the baler kind of like the binder. And then they got one on wheels, but stationary baler, but then they had wire ties, so you had to have a blocker and a tire. And of course, if you go to Farm Fest, you'll see some of these old machinery, but the hay would come in the baler, and it go so far, and then the guy would stick a block down, and then they stuck wires through crossways, and then as the bale come in, it pushes wire, and then somebody tie it, and then it come on out. But that's what they had to do on that. And then they got the balers that you could pull with a tractor and things and stuff. But Then the balers used to have a motor on them instead of a. He didn't have a baler, but he had Ari down here on the river. He was a genius in fixing stuff with a mechanical genius, but you fix stuff with whatever you had,
Sure.
baling wire and stuff. But he had the thrash machine. He had an old New Holland baler and had the big old Wisconsin motor on it, and that big old plunger. I don't know whether you've seen pictures of those, but he'd drag it out here and had an old Moline tractor. And of course, we didn't have a lot of hay, but he'd come bale it. And Zeke he built him actually when they come out with these trucks that haul hay that lifted up and put it on a truck and haul the barn. Zeke made one out of he built it himself. Him and an old blacksmith here in Ash Grove. They come up, they got pulleys and things off of the old machinery and stuff and made it. He got an old truck and
just ingenious.
The frame. But just because he didn't, but he was really good at doing what he does and stuff. So
yeah.
I may be running your.
No, you're doing great. So in a community like Ash Grove, and I've talked to some other farmers in the Ash Grove area. Everybody knew one another. Most everybody, probably from your generation, they were farming. They were all farming.
Well, you told me the other day you interviewed Tim Keith.
Right.
Well, his dad was Bob Keith, and he probably didn't tell you this story.
You tell me.
But his dad used to farm. Of course, his dad was Kim's great-grandpa was Elmer, and Elmer had land, and then Bob come in and milked, but Kim milked when he was younger. I don't know whether he told you all that or not, but anyway, Bob, which is Kim's dad, and I told you about Stanley Davis that opened up the Dairy Queen. Well, Bob would come through town, and when he was headed to the exchange, which is one end of the street, and the locker plant the other end of the street, Bob would honk his horn, so they know that he's going through. And then whenever he come to the exchange, Stanley'd have a strawberry milkshake ready for him.
That's great.
But that's what
Yeah.
you're talking about people know everybody.
Yeah,
and stuff.
sure.
But Dad used to artificial inseminate cattle, and he milked a while and stuff, and then he got in the insurance business. But people went to the insurance agent to pay the premiums, and a lot of times they wouldn't come in, but Dad would go ahead and pay the premium, and they'd pay him later. Sometimes he'd go down. I walked with him a few times to go to collect. Not he didn't twist your arm, but he went and collected the money from people for the premiums because they come due every so often. And he used to go to all the car wrecks. I mean, they had to get a report on the wrecks, so the agent used to have to go to all the car wrecks and stuff. I went with him a lot when kids and stuff.
Was he independent or was he with a company? Or
He's State Farm.
State Farm?
Yeah.
Okay. And so he was like bivocational. He was farming, but he was also an insurance agent, correct? How long was he with State Farm?
35 years or something like that. So, but he used to breed for MFA. Of course, like I said, the dairies used to be all over, and they had artificial inseminate their cows and stuff. And my grandmother's brother lived on the house at the top of the hill here. We called him Uncle Henry, but that's what he used to do. And then getting back to how technology's changed, he told me one time. Of course, he'd go to all the farms, but he said, before you knew anything, it was 2 weeks or so before you knew what happened somewhere else. Now we know it instantly, which I don't know whether that's a detriment to our society now, because it's probably better that we don't know things. But I mean, but before, you didn't have all this communication we have now, so but I remember him saying that and stuff, But,
So you grew up on a farm with father who was farming and also an insurance agent. Describe the farm operation and the role that you had in it and when you started helping with the farm. How old were you?
Well, as a kid, I kind of just assisted Dad, but when I turned 16, I lost all interest in it because I had a girlfriend and everything. I mean,
How can you keep them on the farm?
The preacher Sunday was talking about kids you don't date anybody unless they're a true Christian. You should, and he said, when you find one, your knees are going to buckle. So, when you find the true woman, your knees buckle, But,
Now, is this the woman you're married to
yes,
now?
Yes.
So you started dating her when you were 16 years old? And you've been married how long?
She was a sophomore. We got married in 1971, so 48, 48 years, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what you asked me? Oh, how long? Okay. Yes, and so this house, my grandma lived here, and then Dad moved to town. He built of course, my grandmother lived here, and Dad lived. He built a house in 1950 in town.
Okay,
in Ash Grove.
Ash Grove. Mm-hmm.
And then he bought another little house behind, because the street that his house was built on, the electricity and the water line didn't run down there, so it run down the street behind. So when that little house come for sale, he bought that little house, and my grandma went and lived in the house so he could look after her and stuff. So then Dad rented this out to people that, well, his uncle and things. And when I got married, I moved in here in 1971, and I've been here ever since. So
now, did you live in Ash Grove in the house that he bought?
Well, when I lived with my dad till, yes, when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's what I mean, when you were a child.
Yeah, that he built in 50, and then when I got married, we moved out here. And
right.
Of course, the house looks a lot different than it did. It used to didn't have heating in it. You know, it was all wood stoves and stuff,
right.
And things. It had old plaster walls, and the lath and plaster and stuff. And we've been kind of adding to it for over the years and things. And of course, used to how things used to be when somebody died. I remember a story about in the living room there. You used to have the body there for somebody that died. And
right.
things,
Yeah.
So used to have old telephones at party lines and things.
Sure.
And things, But getting back to I'm sorry.
No,
getting
fine.
back to yes, and I just kind of so after we got married, I kind of took an inkling to want a farm. So
that was going to be my question. Was there a time when you're working on a farm when you're young, you're helping out with the farm.
Yeah.
You're living in Ash Grove, but you're coming out here to work the farm. Is that correct? When
my dad.
Right. Yeah. When you were a young teenager.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. One day I come out to check the cows, and I, being smart aleck, get slick like this, and I slid off in the ditch over here. And things. And Dad got a ticket one time. We was coming out here one Sunday morning. He let me drive when I was 12 years old. And we met a patrolman, and he turned around. He wrote my dad a ticket because he didn't think I looked big enough to be driving. And so yeah.
So you're living in town. You're working out here some, but you get to be 16 and you decide, I'm not too interested in the farm. So you finish high school.
Well, my dad tried to keep. I finished high school and I got married, because I got married in about 20. Yeah, yes, and then of course the farm was still here, and I still helped Dad some. But he kind of got where we kind of, when I got back interested, and we kind of did things together. And then I've increased. I could have bought that land over there across the road for $800 an acre, but I went to Everton, which is 7 miles west, and I got land for $400 an acre. But I had to have it dozed and stuff. So I've got, I probably got 300 and some acres in Everton.
Okay.
And then my other grandpa, my mother's place, I own it just west of town. And
were those fairly recent purchases? Or
no,
that long
they're
time
back
ago?
in this. The last bigger farm's been 10 years ago and stuff.
Okay.
But a good story, if you want a story, is back. And we got married in 71, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And Max King's a big hog farmer over here. And this place was the Manley place, which is my grandma's. And he come over, and her brother lives in Washington, D.C., and he was a dentist, and he owned the land, because it's a big family. And Max come over and said that I'm going to buy this place, but if you want to buy it, you can. Well, I just got married. Yeah, I had a lot of money I wanted to buy land with, So I said, no, I don't want to get tied down. And so Max bought it. Dad didn't really, Dad was getting older. He wasn't too interested in it. And, he just didn't want to fight the battle, Sure. And so ever since Max bought it, I've been after Max to buy it or rent it. And of course, he willed it to his daughter. He just passed away about last year. So now we're renting it. And my grandson thinks he wants to farm. And I'm going to try to buy it, but I don't know whether, if she'd asked, I mean, land's selling for $3,000, $4,000, I mean, you know, and you just can't justify it. But
Right.
I particularly don't want to mess up. I'm going to try to buy this if I can. But so I told my grandson he could. I'm getting away from me again, but I'm letting him rent it and learn how it is to farm. And it's just, you can see it just right next to us, and he's learning a lesson. He's learning it's not quite as gravy as it used to be. But yes, I've always had another job, so I hobby farm.
That's what was going to be my question. Did you, like your father, have another job in farming? What was your profession outside?
I started out at Borbine Young, and I was making $1 and something an hour, and then I got,
which is what,
71, 70, so, you know.
And what was that company that you were
Well,
working
it was
for?
a truck company, and they had springs and wheels and stuff, you know, and the reason I got on there is I thought I wanted to work at Sears, you know, of course Sears used to be downstairs, downtown, but where the Shrine Mosque is, you know, below it and things, and it was a thriving thing. And of course, there was another dairy farmer that milked, but he worked at Sears, and I thought that'd be a good job. But I went in there with my dad one time, and you don't want to hear all this, do you?
Sure, yeah.
I went in there with Sears one time and saw Bill Richter, which I asked about getting on. He said, well, Johnny, which is his son, was working at Borbine Young, and he was going to come back to Ash Grove and work for the Sinclair dealership, which is Rennie Murray. He, you know, we had fuel with oil tanks and stuff, and little trucks go out. And so I went over to Borbine Young and talked to the guy and told him, and he said, well, you want to finish the day up? So my dad sat in the car and waited till but they was a warehouse, and the big trucks like the Shaw truck lines and stuff come in and get their big, and so what I did is package up on pallets for the trucks to come pick up and things. Then I got on at Kraft, because I wasn't making a whole lot of money at, I know I bought a set of chrome wheels for a whole week's, I think the wheels are like $55 in my whole week's pay, you know, so for my car. And my wife had a beauty shop. She worked down, and she didn't make, you know, she made nothing by the groceries. Of course, groceries were, you know, $15, $20 and things. But then I got on at Kraft, and I worked nights, and I wanted to work days. And of course, Vietnam War was going on back in '69, and the way it was going on before that. But my brother-in-law, he had joined the National Guard, and he said, you need to get in the Guard so you don't have to go to Vietnam. Well, I'm a homeboy, and I'm a wuss, you know. I'm not got Nathan's blood in me or Daniel's venturing out, you know. So I joined the Guard, and so anyway, I was in the Guard a few years, and then they had a hangar out there, which Springfield had a repair depot here in Springfield, and so the neighbor that worked up there said they're going to hire some more people to build on. So you want to work the Guard? And I thought, I want to stay in the. Of course, you have to be in the Guard to work there. Right. And of course, it's a non-competitive civil service job. And I said, I want to do that and stay in the Guard from now on. I thought, if I don't like it, I get my 6-year obligation up, I can leave. Guess what? I got on up there, and I never did leave. So I worked out there. I was in the Guard 36 years. 36 years. So, but I hobby farm. Now, the good lady that you just met, which is my wife, she did a lot of work for me while I was gone. I mean, she fed the cows, she raked, she baled. I mean, and
that's hard work, yeah.
And of course, I don't get as hardly much done now that I retired as I did when I was working, because I'd come home, eat, and out the door. I didn't, you know, I had 10, 11 o'clock before I'd come in and go to bed and things, you know, and I was always pilfering doing things and stuff. So, like I said, the land down at Everton I bought, I was down there stringing barbed wire at midnight one night, you know, but that's just how you got things done, you know. But
and was that worth it as far as the income from the farm was concerned? Was it worth doing that, or were you still just doing it just because you loved it?
Probably because I loved it and wanted to build it up. I mean, as far as making a living, right now that I've got everything pretty well paid for and stuff, it's supplementing my retirement and stuff. But for, like I said, being smart and working hard, there's a lot of people out there, I don't know whether they're just spinning their wheels or not, because a lot of it's because you do love it. I mean, I can take you out there right now and show you the little kids running around and stuff, and it's pretty neat, but it was my hobby. I'm not a ball player, I'm not a sports person, and so it was my hobby, and I guess I did love it, I guess. It gets frustrating at times.
But I guess, did the impact of having a father and grandfather and so forth, a line of farmers coming down, is it like in your blood kind of thing, or?
I probably wouldn't have got into it if they hadn't been involved in it and it being there. I probably would not have just started. Some people just want to farm and start from scratch and have nothing, and I probably wouldn't have. I probably would have done something else.
Right.
So that did have a lot to do with it, I'm sure. Yes.
Do you have any siblings?
I got a brother.
And did he farm at all?
No, he had a heart murmur when he's 7th grade, and he felt that Joe Bob, he lives in Oklahoma, and he was, he was not interested in it.
He's not interested
He
in
actually
farming.
went away and got jobs at other places. I don't know why, he just felt uncomfortable. I don't know what it was. But,
So the family farm was basically left in your hands to.
Oh yes,
to work,
right.
sure.
Yeah, and right now we've got a problem of trying to figure out who. I mean, we don't want it to ever be sold.
Right, and you've got a grandson, as you said earlier.
I've got a grandson, but I've got a son, and I've got another grandson. I mean, it's going to be difficult I don't really want to tie it down to where this is definitely, you can't, I don't want to tie anybody up where when I'm gone, I don't want to be the ruler of what can be done with stuff.
Sure.
I should be, but I don't want to be. So we've talked about that a lot. We've decided maybe we need to get something down where this place can be purchased at a reasonable price for the person that wants to do it.
Right.
Because I sure don't, if it's been in the family all this time, I'd rather it not be split up.
Yeah. So if you had to sell it, if your son and your grandchildren didn't farm it, you'd like to see it in somebody else's hands that would farm it?
Well, if they didn't want to farm it, or I know my daughter would want to hang on to it regardless of what happened, but they'd probably would not sell it, but they'd maybe lease it out. I don't think it'd ever be sold.
Right, stay in the family.
Yeah, I'm if they didn't want to farm, I'd say, but I've got my grandson, he's just passionate about farming, and like I said, he's realized now that I said, son, you're going to have to get a job to support your farm. And now there are people that make a living on farm, but it's such a, it is really
much tougher now.
But he's realizing that now. This has been a good education for him. So to get what he wants, he's going to have a job, and then he can buy the cows he wants, the land he wants, and the machinery he wants.
How old is he now?
20.
Okay, all right. Yeah. He's at that pivotal point, close to where you were when you decided you wanted to be a farmer.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Let's talk about the farm as it exists now. Livestock, crops. You've talked a little bit about it. Can you? I think I read somewhere where you converted from orchard grass to fescue at some point. When did that happen? When your father was?
Well, back when I was we used to have orchard grass, timothy, and all that kind of stuff, and then fescue come around. I forgot what year fescue come into the country, but it's a very hardy grass. Now it's got the endophyte in it, where the cows get it restricts their blood flow, and their tails fall off, and their feet get bad and stuff. So endophyte's kind of a hot poison. It's not a poison, but it affects their circulation. But it's just easier to have fescue, and then running cattle, and it's kind of the extension people are trying to get you back to alternatives and clovers and things, and like I said, you used to have timothy. But timothy's pretty vulnerable crop, and made very good hay, and then orchard grass. The trouble is now the orchard grass, somehow it filtrates in fescue, and when you combine the fescue seed and sell, they don't like the orchard grass in it because they can't blow it out. But I'm basically Kentucky 31 fescue now. But what year, I mean, it just kind of gradually progressed from, as you get it sold. But now they've got what they call an end to fight free called Max Q, but goodness, it's about $5 a pound and stuff, and it's not supposed to have that identified in it and things. And they want you to eradicate your fescue and resold, but it takes sometimes you get a stand, sometimes you don't, and things and stuff. And then I've got some alfalfa.
I was going to ask about alfalfa.
Yeah, I sold some Roundup Ready, which I don't know whether you know what that is or not, but we've always had alfalfa, and but alfalfa is just Kansas Common and things, and it's just regular alfalfa, and then anything get in it. But this Roundup Ready now, they just got a release now a couple of years ago, but it can be sprayed out with what you call the Roundup spray that kills the weeds and everything, but doesn't kill the alfalfa. So you can keep your stand clear of the weeds and things. And it's very expensive too, but it's pretty nice because you can go in and get rid of the weeds and things. Of course, the advantage of farming now is the spraying is I know people turn their nose up to spraying, but spraying you can spray and get rid of a lot of the competition, because if you got bare ground, the weeds take over and then it crowds your grass and things out and stuff. But a lot of people going to alternative grasses now, but they're not as hardy. Now the Max Q is hardy, but Kentucky 31, you can, it's pretty tough. I mean, it's hard to kill. I mean, you can kill it, but the droughts we've had have been kind of tough on it.
Yeah, it's easier with the weather. It handles the
extremes of the weather. It's just more durable.
Sure.
So.
And are you baling just for your livestock, or are you baling to sell?
Well, I used to bale some and sell, but honestly, I'm not that big, and then if I bale good hay, I really want to keep it myself. I have combine fescue seed. Of course, now I've got a self-propelling combine, and I go and haul it to the seed house. But I don't know, when you mow hay, it's maturity of it. I mean, if you get a piece of asparagus and eating your lunch and it's been mature, it's tough and you can't chew on it. And it loses protein and nutrients and stuff. So same thing with grass. I mean, orchard grass, you want to mow it in the bloom stage when it starts flowering out, and the fescue, you want to mow it in the boot stage when it just starts making the boot before it makes a seed. And then every day after that, your protein and your nutrients start going downhill. And so being doing fescue seed, you wait till the seed comes out, and then it could be a good, nice rainy year, and you got green grass and you mow it, but you put a bale of hay out that you mowed in the spring before in the right stage. Of course, it rains and it's hard to do in May or early May. And you put an old fescue bale out, they'll clean that spring bale up before they will. It just don't have the taste and stuff in it. So, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but you asked me one question. But yes, I have sold some hay, but now I'm just basically going to just keep it myself. And another problem about selling hay, I'm sorry to point the finger at you, but we don't realize it, but when we take off the ground, every pound of hay we take off the ground takes certain kinds of nutrients away from the ground. And so MFA now has got what's called a fast track fertilizing system, and you're supposed to you get your soil brought up to test, and then you keep a record of what all you take off, and then that tells you, because the alfalfa takes so much of phosphate and phosphorus off, and the poundage, then you need to replace that. And so that's another problem when you sell hay. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the old story about the guy that they said they interviewed a guy one time, he's farming and thought he's just making money, but he was selling hay out of his barn, and he's selling some of his assets, and he was going broke and didn't even know it, now the neighbor over here, Max King, he was a very frugal farmer. Max, he raised hogs, and then he farmed, but he worked hard. He had registered Duroc hogs and stuff, but I talked to him one time, and he said, I don't know why these people pull these empty trailers down the road. They're just wasting money, but we used to didn't have cattle trailers. I don't know why you want to hear a story about hauling cattle or not, but you used to have used to be cattle jockeys that had 2-ton trucks. I mean, it's just a big truck with a bed on it and racks, and they'd come to the farm, and we load the cattle up the walkway of the barn, because all barns have a walkway where you walk and throw hay in the thing, and they'd back up, and of course it had to have a dock, to load the cattle, and my grandpa, like I said, my grandpa was a carpenter, and he'd come by, not this grandpa, but my mother's dad, and or Whitehead used to haul cattle. He'd have my grandpa's cattle kids bought before he'd get out of the barn lots,
Yeah.
But used to be a stockyards in Springfield, and they tore it down. But the way they used to buy it, right now they run them through the ring. But back in those days, they had all these pens, and the buyers would walk around the pens and bid on the cattle in the pens itself instead of running through the ring. And so now they got video auctions, and
Right.
they've got things and different. But getting back to Max was very frugal, and he made money with hogs, and he started raising cattle. He got enough land that he didn't use all this land, and he just, once you get your soil up to a certain test, and if you don't take off of it and rob from it, it pretty well stabilize and stay there without having to fertilize. So Max he kind of did rotational grazing before rotational grazing come out.
Interesting. Yeah.
And like I said, my grandson, we rented this land over here, and this summer he did really good because the grass did good, because and Max didn't fertilize hardly any at all, but the ground, it not being eating the ground, it would replace itself and stuff. So that's where you have to be careful of selling hay and stuff too. Sometimes you're better off just let it rest. Of course, you want to get every dollar you can about things and stuff, but everybody has a different way to farm.
Sure.
And I used to go to extension meetings all the time.
I was going to ask you about that. If you took advantage of services provided by the Extension Office or other departments of University of Missouri or Missouri State or any place.
But I used to go to all their meetings. They tell you to sprinkle clover on the frozen ground in the wintertime. Of course, we had didn't have a cab tractor at the time, and I'd put a cyclone seeder, and I'd put the ear muffs on, sprinkle Lespedeza and clover on. Sometimes I get a stand, sometimes it wouldn't, And so yes, they've helped out a lot. But then again, what you got to learn, what works for you. Because you can go broke trying to do everything somebody tells you to do.
Yes.
So it just, it's an asset though to have them, because you're always calling them, and Eldon Cole, which is the livestock specialist down by Jock, he's been working for him for 50 years.
Wow. And
then the people in Springfield, a lot of them passed on, but I'd want to know about spraying something or this or growing, and you call them up and they tell you what to plant, what you should do and shouldn't do. So it's an asset.
it was helpful to some degree.
Yeah.
Just thinking large in the bigger picture, as we close up here, I just want to ask a few questions. Like, what are the biggest benefits of farming in the Ozarks, in this region?
Well, family value, maybe.
Yeah. So it may not necessarily be all about the soil or the livestock, but it's more about the lifestyle and yeah.
God has blessed me with the most wonderful wife and the most wonderful kids. How He's blessed me with that, I don't know. I don't know whether the farm has really been part of it. It's just that smaller town, you grow up with a different mindset, a different moral attitude. You kind of see how life functions, and like I said, there's people. Not that I haven't made money on the farm. Don't get me wrong. It's just, but I to make a living, I'd have to have a big operation now. But yeah, it's just the values of doing it and the satisfaction, because I'm not a studious person. I got to be doing something. So even I just feel good. And you go home, you come in the house at night, and you go to bed, and you feel good about it.
About what you've done, and what you have. So what on the opposite side? What are the greatest challenges of farming in this area?
This area?
Yeah, in the Ozarks in general, because it's sort of this topography is.
Well, it's getting where I was talking about earlier. You can make a living small. This was 80 acres. They made a living on 80 acres. I mean, they raised chickens and hogs and stuff and made a living. You can't do that now.
Yeah. Why can't you do that now?
It takes too much volume. For instance, I mean, we've grown into an area where we don't do things simple anymore. I mean, my grandpas and stuff, they'd get up and milk before daylight, and they'd follow a horse all day long, come in, and they got by. One of my grandpas had a guy at his house, Lee Harper, and I said, how come Lee was with my grandpa all the time? Well, the table was too short at his house, is what my mother said. In other words, they took, things were tough, but they survived.
Yeah.
Now we operate on such a big scale. It took me years, and that's what I'm trying to instill in my grandson. Of course, he's using my equipment. But for instance, I didn't buy a new baler, but a new baler like I got is $55,000. I bought a used tractor here 3 or 4 years ago. It's $50-some thousand.
A used one?
A used one. I bought a disc. Used to, you mowed with a sickle mower, and a tractor and just a 7-foot sickle mower. Now I bought a disc spine this year. It was $25.50 to $25,500. Not 20, but I'm just saying. And cows, it just takes so much. It just takes so much. Hobby farming is about all person. Now there's some people bought land here, and they're evidently not afraid to go in debt to do it. And I don't know how they're going to do it, but I mean, for instance, there's a gentleman bought some land here, South Ash Grove. He paid $4,000 an acre for it, 220 acres. It's almost $1 million. Well, you only handle 3 head at the most per acre if everything's good. My grandson said, of course, he got to pay $30,000 a year payment. Now, how's he going to do that? I mean, so the biggest challenge, and I'm not begrudging land's got up, it's just the way things are, but the biggest challenge is having the capital to do it. Dairy farms, about all the little dairy farms are out of business here. Sure. Because the big corporations are taking over and stuff.
And did that just drive the price down, or?
Well, yeah, actually, the lady, she works up here at Stockyards in the vet office, and she'd been milking all her life down by Aurora. And they sold last year, but she said that actually the government's subsidizing the bigger dairies, like the big dairies and stuff, and not them. And the feed got high, the milk prices went down, so they just can't, it's costing them more to feed their cattle than it is to, it used to be hogs. You used to have stockyards up here, you used to have a hog barn. People used to raise hogs, take them up there. And of course, my mom's dad always said, you need to sell high and buy low, but nobody ever did that. But I mean, but the hog business is out now. But down in Lockwood now, they're getting hogs they're raising and stuff, but it's done through a corporation. One of these days, I'm going to be raising cattle for somebody else, a corporation or something.
Right, just like they do with chickens, with
chickens and stuff too. Yeah.
Several farmers have told me you get big or get out.
But it takes money to get big.
Yeah, right. And so most of them are getting out.
Yeah. Well, the average age of the farmer, if read the other day, is 50, 60 years old. Some, some, and the kids ain't wanting to get it. I'm talking about crop farmers and things, and things. And of course, up north they had all these floods and things, and it's putting them really out of business because it runs their ground they got to get that ground cleaned up, all that silt in 4 or 5 years and things. And yeah, it's getting pretty, kind of serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know it. I'm sorry, I'm drifting around.
No. This is very interesting. So those are some of the most significant changes that you've seen during the time. Is not being able to be a small farmer anymore.
Of course, we get more money than we used to. You sold a calf stockyard for 45, 50 cents. Thought you did good. Now you get $1, $1.40, $1.50, and the light stuff's bringing $2. Back here a few years ago, which really wasn't a good thing for us, the cattle got up so high, it got too high, and people thought they making money and buying cattle, but then that dropped back down to normal. We've been better off that spurge hadn't happened.
Right,
Because a lot of people made some money, and a lot of people got caught with their britches down, you know. And so but you'd need, I don't know whether 300 head of cattle would make you living on the farm or not. If you want to buy your wife go take her out to eat and stuff every now
But
and
a
then.
minimum, it would have to be like 300.
It'd have to be about 300.
And how much land would that be?
Well, it'd be 1,000 acres
About
at
1,000
least.
acres.
I mean, you know, and then you'd be kind of tight doing it, you know. But volume is the thing. There's some kids over here that they buy feeder calves and stuff, and I don't know how they do it. They must do it through volume, but they exchange about 2,000 head a month. But they're, you know, if you got 10, you make $1, you make $10. If you got 2,000, you're making $2,000.
Sure.
So I mean,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. It's very concerning. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my one of my final questions. I want to ask too. You'd mentioned technology, the impact it's had on farming here. I mean, did it have an impact on you, on your farm operation?
well, I broke it down and bought me a GPS system, put my tractor here a while back. I'm not smart enough to operate it. They do a lot of things. Now the Stacys, they farm big, and they've got a GPS and stuff. And Corey, the boy, he started farming, and he does crops and stuff. But they got it where now you can hook your steering wheel, and you can program it, and it just guides your tractor around the field. But mine, I used to fertilize, and when you sow something, and you just kind of look at a tree at the other end of the fence post and drive straight, and hope you get there. But GPS system, I mean, you can fertilize and not overlap and things, because sometimes you be driving along, and next thing you're fertilizing the same spot you was, and
Right.
it ain't that expensive. So yes, technology has really improved a lot. I mean, the Mennonites, I don't know whether you want to get into them, but they moved down to the Everton area, and they're making their living off of turkey, chicken, and hatchery barns.
So this is not the Amish. This is the
Mennonites. They're really good people. And getting back to what you're saying about farming, they may be the ones that feed our country because they work, they're a group, and the way they're making they got a lot of avenues, but they buy I know one guy, they send the little baby turkeys into him, and then he raises them up so big, and then they go to the bigger turkey house. Now they've got laying houses here. There's 2 houses in Everton now that got 30,000 chickens, but everything's done. They go and turn their blowers on and tells what temperature everything's done with their phone, because they don't have to be there to find out whether the machine, the heater went off and so everything's been automated. The laying farms, they've got chickens. Of course, they set these eggs in California, and because they're the free, it's a different term than free range, but they step outside, and but they're classified, so they get about $5 a dozen for them. But they ship them to California. But chickens come in, they lay, and the conveyor takes it, and then it boxes them and everything, and they put them in a cooler, and they ship them to California. They don't wash them till they get to where they're at, because you wash an egg, it'll spoil, and things. But it's interesting to watch the Mennonites. So they only go to school till 8th grade, but they're pretty sharp.
For what they need to do.
What they need to do.
Got plenty of education.
The point is too that most of us don't want to work that hard. I mean that's another thing about farming, because about everybody around here is either inherited some of their land stuff, and there's very few people start out from scratch. But it's just that nobody. Of course, jobs are getting harder to get, but nobody wants to work hard as it is to farm.
And if you're going to start from scratch, it's almost as if you have to accept the fact that you're not going to necessarily make a whole lot of money, and that you're going to have a lot of expenses. You're going to have debt probably.
Well, yeah, and getting different avenues. See, a lot of you read the magazines all the time. These people starting different avenues of selling vegetable garden stuff, and they sell sheep wool, and it's getting worth it. But I don't know whether they make any money doing it. But you have to diversify pretty well to do it and things, And they have to be satisfied with not making a lot of money.
Right. Which may be the case with the Mennonites, not necessarily
Oh,
worried
yeah, I
about
don't know
making a
how
whole
they
lot of
operate,
money.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but there's people that do things and all natural stuff, and they're just living off the land. See, my problem is I've never been to adventures. I never wanted to get my boat out in the middle of the lake and not be able to swim back. But there are people that's willing to
The risk
borrowing money and jumping into it. So I probably would have lost a fortune, but not willing to do that. But I could have lost my farm too.
Sure, sure.
I'm not very adventurous, but.
Well, this will be my last question, how do you envision the future of farming in the Ozarks? Is it a bright future, or you seem to be concerned about it?
I think that's a good question. I'm concerned about it. I think that it's going to be, well, the Mennonites come in, they're diversifying the turkey barns and things like that, but unless you're willing to do that, it's going to be basically hobby farming and stuff for us to come in and being the big farmers like the dairy farmers and grain farmers and stuff, because it's really, even the grain people down in Lockwood and Golden City area are having struggles with everybody coming into bigger entities, I mean, it's not, there's big people that's gone out of business, but it's becoming, I think it's going to become where the only farming around here would be just because you want to do it, and it's kind of a bedroom, go to work, hobby farm, and if you really want to farm big, you're going to be with the people land stuff. You're going to be doing it for somebody else.
Yeah, so the middle is falling out. In other words, it's either the large corporate farms, or hobby farmers.
Right.
You think that's the way it's going to continue?
I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you look at even the land around here, it's getting, somebody's buying it and building a house in the middle of the nice land, I mean, the farms are disappearing.
Right.
And the Richters used to have a big farm out here. Teddy, his dad fed cattle and stuff, but the conservation bought it. And that land's out of use. It's hurt the school system because the tax base went out of that and stuff, It's just, I'm not talking bad about the conservation, but I mean, it's just, and the reason Ash Grove, like I said earlier, the reason Ash Grove's dying because the solidness and base of this community, nobody's here making their living and people are interested in town. I'm not saying that, but most people come and live here and they drive Springfield to work, so they don't have the input to put into the smaller towns and stuff like they used to.
It's not thriving like it used to.
People's businesses were here,
Right.
I mean, you're talking about knowing everybody. I'm getting off your farm subject, but I mean, I knew all the store clerks and everything.
Sure.
But that was how they made their living.
Yeah. I mean, it really was a community.
And so the farm area situation the same way, because the farmers knew the other farmers, and we still know people, but it's a little different.
It's not the
but
same.
we operate a lot richer than we used to. I mean, we got cab tractors. We got I got a truck out there. Got to do, of course, with land. I had to haul. I got a big Ford truck with a Dewey's bed on it. I went and priced a new one the other day. The truck itself was $52,000 and the bed $13,000. I didn't buy it, but I mean, it's just, it takes so much. But we don't just make a quarter per cow. We don't got to go out and milk cows by hand. We used to milk cows by hand, and cow, you'd have your stool sit on. If she wanted to do her business, you had to grab your milk bucket real quick and pull it away and let her splatter all over you and stuff. But we used to strain milk, we had a milk strainer and drank the raw milk. I remember, I wouldn't do it now, but I used to pour, I'm getting away with the subject, but we used to eat cereal, but you'd set the milk in the refrigerator and the cream would come to the top. And that's big old thick yellow cream. I used to pour that yellow cream on the cereal and eat it. I wouldn't do that for nothing now, I mean, it just, but that's how,
The times have changed.
And my wife's dad, he'd call it, he didn't like it Blue John, it's too thin of milk, it didn't have enough cream in it and stuff, So.
Well, is there anything we didn't cover?
Oh, I don't know. I may have messed up your talking.
Not at all. These are very fascinating stories, and I appreciate you sharing them with us.
Talking about Springfield, used to be two dairies. There used to be Highland and then Foremost. Foremost Dairy, of course, you're from Georgia, you said, or did you say Georgia?
Right.
But Foremost Dairy used to be on Chestnut Expressway, and the way they used to haul milk. See, like I said, the New Zealanders would come in and start these big dairies and things, and they come in and start a dairy, but the little dairies still haven't. New Zealanders, they used to from New Zealand, and they start big dairies, and they actually didn't feed the cows in the barn. They fed them outside, but they produce a lot of milk, because you're talking about hundreds of cattle. But used to, the way the milk drivers, Bonnie Wallace used to live at Willard, and he used to have milk truck routes, and he owned the routes, and he hired people to drive them. But everybody, he had about 10 trucks, but they'd go all over the country picking up milk. Now David Wycuff's down here, and he has to go. He drives all the way down to Mount Vernon stuff, and he had to buy a tanker. A lot of this milk is bought. It's hauled clear to Arkansas for some reason. I don't know, but I knew the Highland Dairy is the only place that buys it now. But things have, just the little places have changed and stuff. And of course, Walmart is Highland had to change. Walmart's got the racks that they put the milk in, and they put it in a new store somewhere, so Highland had to change their capping of their milk jugs, because Walmart wanted to put another couple of rows of milk on, and the pressure that they slide down these racks where they slide the front was so much it popped the caps off the jugs. But Walmart pretty well dictates what goes on. Sure. There used to be, I'm getting in areas, but a lawnmower business, the Hardman's lawnmower business in not Ash Grove, but Willard. And he had a hardware store and worked on it, and then his son took over. But he said, I had to get out of business because I wasn't making enough money selling my lawnmowers, because Walmart, Murray Lawnmower Company, he used to sell Murrays and stuff, but Walmart, when they make a contract with somebody, they squeeze all the juice out of you, and they want them to they're manufacturing for nothing profit. And so he said, I can't sell, I just can't, because I got to make a profit. He had his own individual store.
Right.
And so and then Pennington Seed down here, I'm talking about fescue seed, they buy seed stuff, and you see that in your store. You go to Walmart and want to buy some fescue seed. Well, if they don't sell it all in their period, Pennington has to take it back. They don't, so it's getting so big, you got to be big enough. We're getting away from the small farmer, I know, I'm sorry, but.
No, but it's sort of the same thing.
You got to get big enough to absorb, like Pennington, be able to take the seed back. You got to be, and.
You got to account for that loss.
Yeah.
That expected loss. Yeah.
Well, because the bigger companies are twisting your arm where you can't, So.
And is that somewhat the same way it is with farming and industrial farming, the large farms?
Oh.
Sort of squeeze it, as you said, you'll eventually be raising cattle for somebody else.
I remember hearing a story about a guy who grew oranges out in California, and he didn't belong to the Sunkist Corporation, so they wouldn't buy his oranges. I mean, it's going to get. See, right now, one thing that's proved on cattle, we're doing the EPDs, that's the efficiency progressive differential, and so now I can supposedly go buy a bull or a cow or something. I know he's going to not have a too big a calf, or he's going to produce more milk, and now they're doing DNA, and they take a blood test of it and stuff.
More specific.
And they're more specific.
Yeah.
They're doing embryos. They flush the cow's eggs out, and then they'll put in a donor cow and stuff. But you got to be, somebody like me is not big enough to do that.
Right.
You got to be big to do that and stuff.
Sure.
So. And, these big registered cattle people, a lot of them been in business, but, Pinnaker Chevrolet down at Republic, they got limousine. Well, they go on a limousine, they've got a car dealership, things like that, so. Yeah.
So if somebody's going to farm in this area, is it more than likely going to be cattle now, if unless they're huge?
Yeah. There are some grain people starting now. I don't know, there's a young man, I'm probably eating my words again, but Gern Hartzler down here, the Mennonites come in, they used to this all grassland, very few cropland. Most cropland's down in Golden City and Lockwood because the ground was more fertile and smooth and no rocks. There's rocks here. When the Midnights come in, I told you they're in every avenue and things, and of course grain and stuff got high. So they're getting acreage and things, trying to sow crops and things. So this Gern Hartzell, that's what he's doing. And Jeff Anderson, he's renting land, and if you come in Ash Grove on the left side, you saw wheat. That used to be all pasture land. So there's a few people doing grain. I don't know. Grain's kind of like cattle. I mean, the thing about cattle, I've got some kids I've been wanting to sell right now, and my grandson took his, and the board went down. The virus come out, and
right.
anything affects it. So I'm trying to catch a time, and I may have to keep it until this virus situation gets over because it's affecting the market.
Sure.
And so grain prices, you know, I asked this Gern the other day, I said, are you making any money crop farming? He said, yeah, but I don't believe him. I mean, well, he's got to be in debt higher than this house is, but I guess he is. But I mean, so are our people. He's starting out. I don't know how long he's going to be able to keep the airplane up in the air. Mm-hmm. I hope he can. He's working his tail off, but I mean, he's spending a lot of money and stuff doing it. But I don't know how they're doing it. But yes, there's some people trying to do crop farming and stuff. And
row crop. Yeah.
I think they just in debt up to the hills. You know, I mean, this Jackie Moore down at the stockyards at Joplin. Actually, he bought the Springfield one and sold it that. But they said that he went to a different bank, just got like a 0.25% of different on his interest, and saved him $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year just that because he borrows. I mean, you know, people borrow money to do it.
Sure.
So if you got the guts to do it, I guess there's
the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Thank you very much.